minutes, someone in UK dies because of heart damages caused by heart attack. This means that by the end of this talk, someone else will die. It's terrible. But researchers are working on this, and I am contributing too. How? Studying ultra-bithorax protein. Ultra-bithorax, or UBX, is a protein derived from fruit fly and controls the transfer of genetic information from DNA. But nature provided with another use. When left for some hours in an aqueous buffer, UBX starts to self-assemble at the air-water interface, forming a biocompatible material that can be pulled in fibers or wrapped in films, as you can see in the slide. Fibers and films can be used in implanted biomedical devices in order to regenerate tissues because they have the growth of new bloody vessels. In order to unleash the powerful properties of this film, the core of my PhD is to study the mechanisms involved in film formation and to control it. So, what I practically do, I extract UBX from bacteria and I form different materials, varying different conditions, such as how much proteins I use, in which kind of buffer I put them, and how much time I let them set before I collect samples. Then, the pooled fibers and films are studied with microscopy in order to understand the structure of the films. And I have already understood a new film formation protocol that enables me to take films in a 10 times less way with less proteins. It's like if you want to cook a good pancake in just 2 seconds with a droplet of butter. So, by the end of my PhD, I hope to be able to know exactly what happens while the film forms and to know how UBX interacts with the world around it. And so, one day, maybe, you will be able to see a biomedical devices coated with UBX that enables to regenerate damaged heart attacks. Thank you.
So, I'm talking about trains. Mainly the systems that control them safely, because we don't hear much these days about train accidents, but when they do crash or get derailed, then it's a massive impact. People die. So, traditionally in the UK, it's a classical signal system that we use, where it's basically just lights at the side of the track that are controlled from towers. The drivers are told to speed up, slow down, basic instructions. The problem with this is that it's a very general system. Trains are generalised. They're treated as if they're all the same length, going the same speed, have the same braking time, etc., which means that you can't have tracks packed with as many trains as possible. There's got to be a set distance between them, and it's a really inefficient system. In Europe, they've been developing a system called the European Rail Traffic Management System, the RTMS, and their goal is just to have much more accurate running of trains, so adding sensors to the trains and to tracks to be able to tell exactly where they are, what speed they're doing, and the like. And this has included an addition of something called a radio block center to what is a traditional system, which takes in all this data from the sensors, keeps track of it, and then manages it and sends instructions as necessary. So my PhD is in partnership with Siemens, who are a rail automation company. They've got decades of experience in implementing railway engineering, but because the RBC is so new, they have no experience with that. So their current testing scheme is they make a model, they test it, which can take days and is very expensive. If there's a problem with the model, then they've got to go back to step one and just redevelop the model, and obviously that takes time and money. So the goal of my PhD is to develop Siemens a package that will come up with some test conditions. We'll take the model, testing for these conditions quickly in a simulation and cheaply, and then if that fails, then we've not lost much time or money. We can just go back and try it again. If it does succeed, then it can go on to testing, and then again, sometimes different problems are found, but we find that with a verifier, it finds different problems, and so you can come up with a much more accurate system at the end. So the hope for my PhD is to deliver a system like this to Siemens, so that by the end of it, we can have trains that run safely and on time. Thank you.
Lucky's boat's got a fine for Cuddy, army boys. Lucky's boat's got a fine for Cuddy, and every seam is chinked with putty.
Hi guys, who here struggles with recognising people's faces? If you do, you might be having a condition called prosopagnosia, or otherwise known as facial blindness. Facial blindness affects around 2.5% of the population, which is about the same as dyslexia, but there's not as much known about it and not as much to support it. Currently, the computer science community are looking at supporting patients with prosopagnosia by using facial recognition and usually on smart glasses, such as Google Glass. So you have a camera here and it will then ping up maybe on your face saying, I'm talking to Bob, for example. But the problem with facial recognition, it's not good for the privacy of the user or the privacy of the patient, and also facial recognition does not always work in bad lighting, or say if I want a haircut or something. So what we're working on is something supporting patients with prosopagnosia using a microphone or a smartwatch. So we're listening to the normal conversations you would be having, so like whatsoever, and then we're sending it to the smartphone and running it through a couple of neural networks to create a voice signature which is unique to your voice, and then we're comparing it into our database, and then we're seeing that that let's say we're talking to Sean, and then sending a picture here for example, name, a picture and some notes on a person, just to help you reorientate themselves. So hoping that to make people faces look from this to this, so you can create links. We're still quite early on in the research, but at the moment we've got some petitionary design sessions coming up where we're looking to see how to run it if an application fails. So say, do we give a top 5 guesses we think it is, or do we just say we don't know who it is? And we're also hoping to run a user study to test the application in the wild in a few months' time. But we have been discussing with caseworkers or people with who deal with prosopagnosia and also autism spectrum disorders and Alzheimer's, and they're also very interested. I think this work could help change people's lives with prosopagnosia by giving more confidence to go out socially and to go and meet new people. Thank you very much.
Sitting through 10 of these presentations statistically reduces your overall lifespan. The NHS recommend an active break from sitting every 30 minutes to combat the negative effects of sitting behaviours, which range from slight weight gain to all-cause mortality. In fact, sitting through an average work day increases your chance of premature death by up to 59%. So what do? We join the Fitbit craze. We install apps to prompt us to move more. Now, statistics from the Fitbit app in 2016 showed 20,000 daily downloads and a flat 8 million monthly users. So there's all these downloads, but no growth. Users are gained, but they're not retained. Now, whether this is due to the unending nagging of notifications or the simplistic methods not engaging with you, these applications are struggling to create a meaningful change in your behaviour. So the main purpose of my research is to create that change by addressing common concerns with these systems. Now, notification fatigue sets in because users receive messages at inopportune times. By analysing contextual details, making sure the conditions are just right for you, these notifications could prompt actual positive change. Now, my passion for this project is to create a system that, through the use of multiple behaviour change techniques, finds the right way to make you move. Perhaps you like competition, perhaps you need outlined instruction, perhaps you need to better understand why you're doing it. Through machine learning algorithms, we could personalize the system, creating individual profiles for each user, matching behaviors to methods. New users can then be matched to a profile, to a method, and find success much earlier in the process. Now, right now, 100 NHS staff are engaging in a wellbeing intervention in which they're able to compare their performance against an average of similar peers. It's hoped that this comparison will encourage them to engage and to perform. But now here's the twist. This average isn't real. It's algorithmically generated to encourage the user and outperform them all the times. We have to design this such that this algorithm does not supplant the person using it, but rather empowers them to succeed. We have to design this system alongside its users to make sure that they are not taken advantage of, and every method used must be carefully crafted to make sure that it prompts you to move, but only when you want it to. This combination of human and artificial intelligence will create a system that will help you to counter those 10 presentations you've just sat through.
Me boys delighted. Aha, me boys delighted. Honest is Lukey, I don't care.
Don't eat shellfish in the months that don't contain an R. These warnings not to eat shellfish in summer are quite common in coastal regions around Europe. And if you heard that before, you've probably wondered why. And the main reason for that are harmful algae blooms that tend to occur in summer. They're caused by microalgae, for example Thesis, that are part of the plankton. If they grow to large biomasses, they start to accumulate in shellfish, making them toxic. People who have not heeded that warning before and eat those shellfish will fall ill with something called diarrheic shellfish poisoning. And of course you can't sell those shellfish anymore, which is why those harmful algae blooms have repeatedly caused the shutdown of aquacultures around the world and severe economic damage to local fisheries. If that weren't already enough of a problem, these blooms are becoming more and more frequent, mainly due to climate change. So there is a huge demand for knowing when these blooms are going to happen, and also mainly the severity. Because if fishers knew when these blooms were going to happen, they could move their aquacultures out of the way, for example, to a different water layer. But it's quite difficult to do so because these blooms are happening quite irregular and not always every year. A good way to do predictions are computer simulations or models. And the models that I used so far in predicting, or built to predict, are focusing on the biology. So a model that would focus on predicting these blooms would kind of work like having a box for the algae, which works like a bank account. You have an inflow, which are the nutrients, and you have an outflow with those the excretion of material. So the balance between nutrients and excretion, so the balance in your bank account or algae box, will tell you how many algae you're going to end up with and whether you're going to have a bloom, as you can see in the background. The problem so far with these algae prediction models, however, is that they haven't really produced a reliable output yet. So the problem is that that these algae are often mixotrophic and they're missing the spray input. So I've built a model that uses the spray input, and hopefully when I advance this model, it will produce a higher reliable output and can help this poor fishermen and moving their algae out of harm's way. Thank you.
With a spring in the air, me boys delighted. Aha, me boys delighted.
Have you ever felt
but perhaps someone also taking that exam has told you that they're not feeling stressed at all. In these situations, the physiological stress response is activating, producing hormones such as cortisol. Now, how flexible this response is, and how much your cortisol changes, depends on how stressful you perceive the event to be. Now, when responding to the same event, some individuals may increase their cortisol, some may decrease, and some may stay the same. And this level of change is referred to as the level of plasticity. Now, hormonal changes are well known in the animal kingdom. Fish are known to increase their stress levels when a predator is present, and humans are known to increase their stress levels right before giving a presentation and decrease after. So something all of us will probably experience today. However, research tends to not focus on these individual differences in response and the implications that they may have. In my PhD, I aim to investigate how individuals respond to change by looking at this flexibility in the cortisol plasticity. So imagine I was to tell you that tomorrow you're all going to take part in an unknown social task. You don't know what this task will be, and you don't know who will be present for this. Now, for some of you, this will cause your cortisol to significantly increase in anticipation of the unknown. But perhaps some of you enjoy taking part in new things, so your cortisol might not change as much. Now, that's exactly what I found when I did this study. There were individual differences in the cortisol response to an unknown social task. Some individuals were more flexible and showed a greater response than others. Now imagine you're out walking on the Welsh mountains, and in typical Welsh weather fashion, it's dry 1 minute and then it's raining the next. Now, whilst you have the choice to go home and get dry, wildlife such as sheep have no option but to endure these changes in weather, as well as changes in food availability. And all of these things can influence their stress response. So I looked at food availability in sheep and found that again, there was individual differences in how they were responding to this change. Some individuals increased their cortisol lots, and some didn't change at all. So why are these important? In our ever-changing world, it's important that we understand how individuals are adapting to change, both natural changes and the changes that we impose. In terms of wildlife and conservation, we have the responsibility to ensure that all animals in our care are looked after and experience as little stress as possible. In terms of human and our own life, I'm sure we are invested in ensuring that we have as little stress as possible. So highlighting these individual differences shows that it is impossible to have a one-size-fits-all approach for all individuals in any stress management system, and that we need to focus on these individual differences and see whether that having a more flexible cortisol response will make us more adapted to these changes. Thank you.
Well, old Lookie's rolling out his grub behind me, boys. Well, old Lookie's rolling out his grub. It's 150 and a 10-pound tub behind me, boys. It didn't like it.
So our understanding of the origins of mass is due to the Higgs mechanism, and our evidence for this process is, or was, the discovery of the Higgs boson, which was famously found in the summer of 2012. But the problem with this is that we weren't able to actually predict what the Higgs mass would be. We had to find it first and then measure it experimentally. On top of this, any theoretical explanation that we might have for its mass is actually unnatural. Specifically, we have to get two parameters, which themselves have to be measured experimentally, extremely finely tuned in a way that seems too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence. And indeed, the level of accuracy required is similar to having to measure the circumference of the Earth to within 1/millionth of the width of a proton. So not only does this seem unlikely, but it's also way beyond the reach of any form of experiment. So my PhD involves studying theories that can explain the Higgs mass without the need for fine-tuning by describing it as made up of smaller constituents, much like the nucleus of an atom is made up of neutrons and protons, which themselves are made up of quarks. So perhaps the Higgs is made up of smaller constituents themselves. And the prediction of these theories is the existence of particles known as blue balls, and their masses can be determined with the use of very powerful computers. Now, the code I'm using to determine these masses was not written by me, but I am using it to determine original results. I choose the inputs and outcoming answers. And these results take a couple of days each, so patience is as much of an asset as computer literacy. But if these theories, once these results have been published, which they should be soon, I hope, it will allow their detection experimentally, which will allow us to hunt for evidence for these theories in much the same way as the Higgs boson provided evidence for the Higgs mechanism. And another feature of these theories is similar, in fact, to what happens to liquid water when you increase temperature. When you boil your kettle, water molecules go from being bound together in liquid form to being free to move independently as steam. And perhaps a similar thing will happen to particles being bound together to form the Higgs boson to being free to move independently when we increase temperature. So the discovery, or indeed confirmation, of these theories, which I hope to put together in my thesis at the end of it all, will allow us to describe a fundamental part of nature in a less artificial way. Thank you.
A Mickey's boat's got high top sails, aha, me boys.